Yes, I'm afraid it's true, and I'm really sorry. After 13 years of making Wheeler Dealers, I'm now going to be leaving the show.
For 13 years, Edd China was the beating heart of Wheeler Dealers. He was the mechanic who could look at a dead engine and see exactly how to bring it back to life, explaining every step so clearly that millions of people felt like they finally understood cars. Then, in 2017, he vanished. There was no farewell tour, just silence. While behind closed doors, he quietly built a garage nobody got to see. So what actually pulled the world's most trusted mechanic away at the height of his career? And what had he been quietly building behind those closed doors? Join us as we reveal what was discovered in Edd China's garage that left fans speechless. The exit nobody saw coming. In March 2017, Edd China shocked fans of Wheeler Dealers by announcing his departure from the long-running and beloved automotive series. For over a decade, the tall, affable mechanic had been sliding under cars, diagnosing problems that would leave most people completely lost, and explaining every single step of the repair process in a way that made fans feel like they were genuinely learning something. But after 13 seasons and hundreds of car transformations, Edd decided to step away. And it wasn't because he'd lost interest in cars. The reasons ran deeper. For anyone who had followed the show, the news hit harder than expected. Because Edd China wasn't just a co-host on Wheeler Dealers, he was the reason viewers trusted the show in the first place. The show itself had started out as something quite straightforward. A low-budget UK production built around a simple premise: to find a used car, fix it properly, and sell it for a profit. Mike Brewer was in charge of the buying and selling side of things. He was an expert negotiator and had charm. Edd, on his part, couldn't be bothered with paperwork. He was merely interested in the shop and the marvel of machines that lined up there. What Edd brought to the workshop segments of the show was something that set Wheeler Dealers apart from almost everything else in automotive television at the time. He showed everything in detail, not just the before and after. Because of his methods, viewers knew why a component had failed, what the correct fix actually involved, and what could go wrong if the process was rushed. They would tune in to watch a car get restored, but end up understanding how the cars actually worked. And that educational quality became the foundation of everything the show was. But things began to change by 2017. Discovery Channel suddenly decided to move production of Wheeler Dealers from the UK to the United States. They handed the show to a new production company with a different vision for what the show should be. Almost immediately, the workshop segments, those detailed, unhurried breakdowns that Edd had built his reputation on, were being cut back. The new company was more interested in faster edits, tighter run times, and a pace that suited a broader audience with less patience for the details. Edd didn't agree with that direction at all, and in his departure video, he laid it out clearly. According to him, if the detail is stripped away, then there's no point to it. For Edd, that was the line he wasn't prepared to cross. He refused to fake it. If the show wasn't going to let him do the work the right way, he wasn't going to stay and pretend otherwise. So he left. As expected, fans immediately reacted, and their reactions were intense. Many threads ran on social media for days. Old YouTube clips started getting new comments. Even people who hadn't thought about the show in years suddenly felt the loss like something personal. And that alone says everything about the kind of connection Edd had built with his audience over those 13 seasons. Mike Brewer responded publicly, expressing genuine sadness about the split, and confirming that the show would continue with a new co-host, former Formula One mechanic Ant Anstead. And the show did continue. Edd, for his part, didn't lash out. He avoided the drama and refrained from throwing blame, instead offering fans a calm and reasoned explanation. But the implications were clear. The version of Wheeler Dealers that had made him a household name was no longer a place where he could do what he believed in. There were also personal consequences. And then he disappeared. For nearly a year after that, Edd kept a low profile. He didn't announce new projects, didn't show any television deals, and gave absolutely no real indication of what came next. Fans wondered whether he was done with the industry entirely, whether the fallout had cost him more than just the job. Edd had walked away from the cameras. He hadn't walked away from his work. What they found inside the garage. For most of Edd China's career, his workshop had always stayed private, not deliberately hidden, but just not offered up for public viewing. The world saw him at work on television and through everything that followed. But the actual workshop, where his own personal projects lived, had remained behind closed doors. A private tour was reportedly arranged, and some people got inside. Thanks to that, the contents of the garage are now known, and what they found was worth the wait. The first thing that comes into view is something that sounds made up, but isn't. A fully drivable orange. The Outspan Orange was built in the 1970s to promote a South African fruit grower. It's a spherical fiberglass shell on a mini chassis, with a wheelbase of just 48 inches. Edd had bought it directly from the original company and kept it running for years. The engine sits under the dashboard, which means if the car ever breaks down by the roadside, he's at least protected from the rain while he fixes it. Then there's the project that actually put his name in the record book. Against one wall, immediately recognizable to anyone who has followed Edd's career closely, sits the street-legal sofa. A full-sized living room sofa mounted on a custom-built chassis, fitted with steering, suspension, and a drivetrain capable of moving it through actual public roads at actual road speeds. It's registered. It was driven on public streets. And standing next to it in person, the engineering involved in making something so absurd function to a standard that satisfies road legal requirements is just remarkable in a way that photographs don't fully convey. There is also the second machine that gave Edd global recognition. In 2018, he started tearing the diesel engine out of a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van and rebuilding it from the ground up as an electric ice cream van. 2 years later, that ice cream van hit 73.921 miles per hour and set the Guinness World Record for the fastest electric ice cream van on the planet. Nearby sits the motorized bathroom, a functioning toilet on wheels, complete with plumbing, a steering column, and every component required to make it not a prop, but an actual drivable vehicle. Further back in the workshop, things quiet down a little, but they don't get any less interesting. There's a 1982 Range Rover he'd been slowly bringing back from the dead. Its fuel lines rusted through to the point where getting it running again took several weeks. Parked close by sits a 1962 Alvis, a name that goes all the way back to 1919, tied to the same designer who later shaped the original Mini. And right in the middle of it all sits the van he actually drives, a VW Transporter T5, in the shop for something far less glamorous than everything around it. Just a tired oil cooler and an AC pump giving out. It's worth noting that these marvelous machines weren't new items built for a single television appearance and then retired to a corner. They were real projects engineered to real standards by someone who found something genuinely satisfying about taking an outrageous concept and pursuing it with complete mechanical seriousness. Edd is one person who follows ideas past the point where most people would conclude they aren't going to work. Every project in his garage, finished or abandoned, tells the same story about the person who built it. A garage full of finished projects raises an obvious question. What was he actually planning to do with all of it? The return nobody predicted. Leaving a hit show doesn't come with a roadmap. Still, for someone of Edd's status, some people expected that after walking out of Wheeler Dealers, he would find a guaranteed audience. He didn't. He walked into the uncertainty of figuring out what came next, and it took him more than one attempt to land on something that worked. The first swing was Garage Revival, which premiered as a pilot on his YouTube channel in May 2018. The concept was very straightforward. Edd would travel to the garages of ordinary car enthusiasts across the UK who had taken on restoration projects and found themselves stuck somewhere in the middle, and he was going to help them get across the finish line. The first episode took him to Norway to help a fan finish restoring a Volkswagen Golf GTI Mark I that had been sitting half rebuilt for longer than its owner was comfortable admitting. The car was in that particular kind of limbo that anyone who has ever taken on a project vehicle will immediately recognize. It was too far along to walk away from. The owner, who had done everything he could with limited tools and knowledge, welcomed Edd into the chaos of his half-finished project. What followed was a methodical and honest assessment of the car's condition. Edd didn't play for the camera. He didn't simplify things for the sake of drama. He got on the floor and got his hands dirty. And what viewers got from that first episode alone was exactly what they had been missing since he left Wheeler Dealers. The unhurried explanation of what was wrong and why. The response, by most accounts, was immediate. Viewers who commented on that first episode described it like a reunion with someone they'd followed for years. Some people said they had been waiting for exactly this, that it felt more honest than anything else in automotive content at the time. A number of them went as far as saying they preferred it to Wheeler Dealers. Not because Wheeler Dealers had been a bad show, but because this felt closer to who Edd actually was when nobody was shaping the format around him. The scrappiness of the production seemed to work in its favor rather than against it. There was no network budget behind it, no executive producer steering where the story should go. From what's been reported, Edd was handling the writing, the presenting, and a good deal of the editing decisions himself. It came across rougher than a TV package, and that roughness is exactly what made it land. Nobody was watching for polish anyway. If there's one thing Garage Revival seems to confirm, it's that Edd was never the sum of his platform, his budget, his co-host, or his network deal. He was the reason any of it worked in the first place. His depth of knowledge, the way he explained it without talking down to anyone, and his conviction that an audience deserves to actually understand what's happening, not just watch it happen. Strip every other element away, and by the sound of it, that alone was still enough to keep people watching. Unfortunately, Garage Revival just didn't turn into an ongoing series. Around the same period, Edd also announced a second concept called Built by Many. That one didn't gain traction either. After Garage Revival had run its natural course, Edd was in a position he hadn't been in for a long time. He had proven he could work independently, that his name and reputation and genuine passion were enough to sustain an audience without any of the infrastructure of mainstream television behind him. The question was what to do with that proof. And so, Edd spent roughly 4 years testing formats until he found the one that actually fit. Building on his own terms. That working format finally arrived in April 2021 when he launched Edd China's Workshop Diaries on YouTube. And while Garage Revival had been outward-facing, traveling to other people's spaces to help them finish what they had started, Workshop Diaries turned the premise around entirely. This was Edd's own garage, his own projects, his own thinking, brought directly to anyone who wanted to follow along on a schedule determined entirely by the work rather than by a broadcast calendar. On the surface, the format was simple. It aired as weekly episodes, most running somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. following whatever Edd happened to be knee-deep in that week. There were engine teardowns, component analysis, fabrication work, and diagnostic walkthroughs. But beneath that simple setup was something with a lot more direction than Garage Revival ever had. Workshop Diaries wasn't just about whatever car was sitting in front of him. It was pointing at something bigger, where he seemed to believe cars were actually headed. He didn't need to say it outright. The work said it for him. Long before electric vehicles became the conversation everyone in the industry was having, Edd was already elbow-deep in the practical side of it. He didn't bother talking about policy or chasing the trend. He just worked through the actual engineering problem. He was searching for what it took to modernize a classic without stripping away the thing that made it worth keeping in the first place. For an audience that had been anxious about what the shift to electric vehicles meant for the machines they loved, it was genuinely satisfying. Not because Edd was selling optimism, but because he was demonstrating something real and measurable. Workshop Diaries became the place where Edd worked that question out in front of everyone. As he previously did in Wheeler Dealers, he walked viewers through the whole process. Every problem that popped up mid-build got shown exactly as it happened, mistakes and all. As Workshop Diaries developed across its first year and into its second, the scope expanded. Traditional restoration work appeared alongside more experimental territory. Lightweight composite materials, regenerative braking applications in older platforms, homemade tooling solutions, and long-form responses to viewer questions that sometimes became the episode themselves. Unlike Garage Revival, the response was not explosive. It grew steadily, something that suited the nature of the channel perfectly. The audience that had found Edd through Wheeler Dealers was still there, but Workshop Diaries also attracted people who had come through completely different routes. Among his viewers were engineers and students who found the technical content practically useful. Classic car owners working through their own modernization decisions also tuned in to get ideas. There were also younger viewers who had arrived at cars through a different path and found in Edd someone who made the subject feel both serious and genuinely accessible. A channel that grows slowly, on the strength of the work alone, isn't really a comeback story anymore. It's a verdict. Edd China's legacy. Edd's journey shows something that is often overlooked in the fast-moving world of media and automotive entertainment, staying true to his principles. He could have stayed with Wheeler Dealers, taken huge paychecks, and adapted to a faster, flashier version of himself. But he didn't. He chose to walk away from a successful formula because it no longer aligned with his core belief that the process matters as much as the product, that the how is just as important as the what. Although that decision was a big risk, it earned him respect that spread way beyond the car enthusiast community. He became an embodiment of integrity in an industry where compromise is often the default. And it wasn't the first time the world had officially taken notice of what Edd could build. Long before the ice cream van, he'd already picked up Guinness World Records for the fastest toilet, the fastest bed, the fastest milk float, and the largest motorized shopping trolley ever built. None of those sound like serious engineering on paper, but once you saw the work that went into making something absurd actually move, and move safely, at real speed, all of them appear more serious. What set those records apart from a stunt reel was that Edd never treated them like a punchline. Every one of them got the same patient, step-by-step explanation he gave a rusted Land Rover on Wheeler Dealers. He never just made it work. He made sure his viewers understood how. Edd continued to produce Workshop Diaries, still diving into new topics, exploring new technologies, and still answering questions that most shows never bother to ask. By its second year, the channel had become something more than a content platform. It had become a community built around the kind of detailed, unhurried conversation about engineering and craft that rarely survives contact with mainstream media in any intact form. There was no network breathing down his neck this time, no executive deciding which repairs were worth the runtime. But that didn't mean it was running on nothing. Brand partners backed the channel, the kind of support that pays for the workshop upgrades and keeps the lights on. Not the kind that dictates what gets fixed on a given week. Edd picked the projects. The sponsors just helped him afford to keep doing it properly. It was curiosity and craftsmanship setting the pace, with just enough backing behind it to let that pace stay sustainable. He didn't need a comeback story handed to him by a network. He built one himself, one honest episode at a time. Do you think Edd China should have stayed with Wheeler Dealers? And if he didn't, would we have known what he could build on his own? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.